Hey everybody. Hi. So good to see you all here today. Thanks for showing up for art and friends and poetry and all of the things that sometimes they mean the most, but sometimes in life we can cast them aside. And yet these are the things that make life worth living. So I have 3 poems in this book. You'll notice they're at the very end. That's because I was that person that would not send the poems. The poem I want to share today, I'd like to preface with a bit of a story. The poem is called Annabelle, and it's about Annabelle the goat, who was a dearly beloved creature in my life, and very much a part of the story of how I ended up here in this valley and here at Karuna. So, like many of us, I ended up here in Guatemala, not really knowing why I was here or what I was doing. Why had I been summoned to this place? What was I meant to do here? You know, I think like a lot of people, I had a lot of confusion at the beginning. And I thought maybe I would leave and go someplace else, and I'm just really unsure. And so, in a cloud of this confusion, I ended up. This was about 2.5 years ago. I ended up at the farm. Maybe some of you guys have been there, Granja Siken, across the street. And I'll never forget walking in, and I passed by the goat pen. And something in my heart just like went off like fireworks. Like, I love goats. Like, I don't know. I've always had this like weird love for goats. I think they're funny and mischievous and just like delightful in all of the ways, you know? And so I was so excited to discover that the goats go up the mountain every day. Like a lady, Rosa, she takes the goats up the mountain every day, and I could go with her. So I... all of my plans, all of my confusion kind of like just evaporated when I found something that really kind of like turned me on. Not like in a sensual way, but in like I suddenly felt so alive with this prospect of being able to herd goats up the mountain. And so I started my internship as a goat herd apprentice. It was one of the greatest vocations of my life. So I started going with the goats, and still, like, in the midst of this confusion of, like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I here? Where, like, and the only thing I really had to anchor myself at that point was just, like, going to herd the goats up the mountain every morning. And goats will teach you a lot. Goats will teach you a lot about leadership, about influence, you know, about working with others, you know, because you can't use language with them. You can only use, like, energy and presence and tortillas. There's like a fine line between like stones, like throwing a stone where you don't want the goat to go, because then they're like, ah, and then a tortilla kind of like leading it where you do want it to go. So there's this like fine pull of like how to influence others, you know. So I learned a lot from the goats, and there was one particular goat who was my favorite goat of all. Her name was Annabelle. I still, to this day, as you can see, like, she holds such a special place in my heart. I don't know. She was the smallest goat, the sweetest goat, the slowest goat. She was always the one at the back of the herd. I would always have to, like, kind of, like, keep up with her, like, come on, Anna, like, come on, honey, like, let's go. And a lot of times she's closing her eyes, like just eating, and I developed such a sweet relationship with this goat. She looked like a deer. She was a very sweet little goat. But she was weak in a lot of ways. She was like the runt of the litter. And the thing about goats is that they can be very, as I said, they can be very mischievous. They can be very tough. They can be very, almost like aggressive. They can be aggressive, not almost. They can be very aggressive with one another. And so, I fell in love with Annabelle, and I even, do you know how there's like an Adopt a Highway program where you can like adopt a highway, but you don't really own the highway. You just kind of like, you contribute and maybe like give it special care, you know. So I like adopted Annabelle. She wasn't mine, but I started giving her extra love, going and giving her tortillas. I brought her to Karuna once. I'll never forget the time I like walked in the doors here of Karuna with this like little deer goat with me. Like, hi Luke, is there any place I can graze this goat? And I think the roommates didn't quite know what to think of it, but it was good. It was sweet. And so we had some really precious times together. And then I went away to Antigua, and I came back, I wish I had gone to see her sooner. But a few days after I got back, like one of the guys showed up from the farm, showed up here at Karuna, and they're like, "There's been an accident. There's been an accident." As I mentioned, the goats can be very powerful and aggressive, and she was the smallest goat. She was the runt, and they have these small pens. And so what happened was, there was some disagreement amongst the goats, and they like attacked her. They attacked her. They headbutted her. They ran. I don't know what happened, but they broke her leg. And so the guys knew that I was so attached to this goat, and so they like normally, it's a small farm. Something happens, they just put the goat down. They don't, there's no ritual. There's no, it's just kind of like a fact of life on the farm. That's like the life cycle on a farm. Shit happens. Sometimes animals die, and it's part of the life cycle. It's completely normal. But because they knew that she was so special to me, they like called in the vet. They called in, is there anything we can do for this goat? Like, this goat is so special to this girl. Is there anything we can do to save this goat? And unfortunately, the consensus was, no, you can't save this goat. So they were coming to tell me that, you should probably come and say your goodbyes to Annabelle. So it's what? So I remember even going over, I brought in other people, please, people who knew things about goats, please, someone tell me that there's something we can do for this goat. But everyone's no, there's nothing you can do. The break was such, anyways, it was really hard. And so I went to say goodbye to Annabelle. And she, the thing that was really confusing for people was, she wasn't screaming in pain. She was still, kind of, quiet, but, her leg was just dangling, and, it was bad. Everyone who worked with animals was no, unfortunately. So I went to say my goodbyes, and interesting thing was, we mentioned that I make videos online. I have a pretty wide audience. So I made a series of videos in this process. There was one video where I was, in the driver's bed with Annabelle the goat, and love, happy, the goat. And then there was a series of videos of, doing a video of, this is my goodbye with Annabelle, where I was, crying. And then, as the story went on, a lot of what I'm learning here in this valley, my education is really about, the reality of life. You don't get the light without the darkness. You don't get life without death. You don't get, the fullness of, the glory of really witnessing the beauty and seeing the beauty in another person without also going through these, incredibly dark times where you witness just, the ultimate, darkness in the world. They go hand in hand. So what ended up happening is that, on this farm, when they do have a goat that dies, or when they put a goat down, because we're a small farm in the middle of nowhere, right? They cook the goat, and everybody eats the goat, right? It's they give it to the woman, the Mayan woman, and she does the process, and they make a stew, and everybody eats from people working the farm to the families to the workers, the dogs, everybody eats. And so I was then faced with the choice of do I eat Annabelle? So I was really challenged. I was so challenged about that, of what's right, what's wrong, what do I believe about life, and I feel my whole journey here to this point has been me being willing to challenge my beliefs of right and wrong, good, bad, true, false, and just. So anyways, so the third video in that series of videos was me eating the goat. She was great. It was a really emotional process, and of course, as you can imagine, a lot of people. It was very triggering. For people. Yeah, it was very triggering, and so I received so much hatred for this. A lot of people to this day think that I personally slaughtered the goat, and I did this, and I killed it. that day that was like I was literally that day that like I knew that it was happening. Like I was just in my house crying most of the day, like going offline because I couldn't handle everything that was coming at me. Like it was a really intense day, just sitting with all these feelings. So in that day I wrote this poem. Yeah. So without further ado, I'm gonna read you the poem about Annabelle. Oh. Ah. A goat is gone. A goat who was loved, more than most goats ever get to be loved. She was slow and small, and the jungle took her, as it does with most things that are slow and small. And yet, her soft, sensitive eyes are still with me, searching for the tortilla. I know why she loved me and let me come close to hug her neck and stroke her back. And sometimes, when I was lucky, to press our foreheads together. And that's why I made sure to always have tortillas when I went to her. That's it. It's simple, it's small, but I think for me, what it speaks to is just like, we go through these moments in life where it's like really hard, when we're grieving, when we're like in pain, and like it's so easy to like numb out and distract and run away from it. But I think one of the best things that we can do in those moments is just like create, like write something, dance, like write a song, like write a poem, like create some art, like channel that energy, channel that pain, channel that, all of that humanness into like something, and it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Like I don't think this is like a great poem, but it holds a piece of my heart, for this beloved creature that above all, like she was my teacher, she came to teach me, and she still holds a very special place in my heart. And I think that's what really still bothers me when people get on my channel and give me hatred. They give me this spew this hate at me about how I slaughtered this goat, and it's like, oh, the goat that you never met and you never cried a single tear over and that you have no relationship with, and yet you're like judging me. Like it speaks also to just like the nature of relationship and like how we build relationships and like what relationships can mean and be, and like when they end, and like that grief, and just processing all of these things, especially when it like looks bad or people don't agree with you or they don't get you. And it's like, how do you hold your center in those spaces, and like what can be created from that humanness, like what can be created from that polarity, what can be created from that like division, what can grow out of that darkness. So that's what this poem really represents to me. So
You want to trigger some people in your audience, some people here. There's a box for you to open.
Oh no. Well, I know it's not her skull because I burned that.
Really? Whose skull is that?
Oh God! Did you have some random goat skull in the box?
I
Jesus
could have
Christ!
sworn that was Annabelle's skull.
Thanks, Luke. I got here today. It's like I have something in the box for you.
Oh, this is it?
No, this is not Annabelle's skull, but this is someone else's skull. No, I held on to Annabelle's skull as like a totem for a while, and then when I thought I was dying last year, I did a big clearing and purging of all my things, including her skull, and I finally just like released it. A traditional Easter goat skull burning ritual, Yeah. Thanks, Luke. Thank you. No, here's the thing. One thing I learned in that process was like people demonize death. They were so unsettled by death. They were so unsettled at this thought of like this cute thing dying, right? And that's one thing that I've learned here in this valley, this time here in Guatemala, is just I've had so many so many instances where I've had to face death. We had a dear friend, Oliver, who died. I've had puppies die. I had a turkey I knew die. Like, dogs dying. Like, so many, like, I've seen death, and yet I understand now that that's such part of life. Like, this is life. You don't get life, the fullness of life, without the darkness of death. You don't get the life well lived without sinking and swimming in those darkest places that in our culture traditionally we're not encouraged to go into. We're not encouraged to face it. We're not encouraged to, like, step into it willingly, right? Like, we have this cultural belief that, like, aging is bad, death is bad, endings are bad, and yet all of those things are just doorways. It's an opening to something new. And that's one thing that I've actually learned, is that the darkness is that fertile place. It's that fruitful place where the butterfly grows its wings. Like, that's where we get the inspiration. That's where we get the innovative new ideas about life. You know, that's where we're reborn. Like, you don't get flowers without compost. You don't get new life without the breaking down and death and decay of the old. Like, that's part of it. And if you don't like it, then it doesn't matter. Like, it's still going to happen. But the more that we can lean into being at peace with the darkness, being at peace with death, and understanding it's a normal, natural part of life, then the more we can be at peace with life, with all of it, you know? Not just about glorifying the happiness and the good times and looking good and feeling good and, you know, put on a happy face. Like, no, cry out your grief. Like take it, face it, you know, because that's where, like, the real miracle of life is born. So that's what Annabelle and that poem means to me. And Luke, that's just kind of, I mean, it's, okay, I celebrate you. I still don't know whose skull this is. Wow. So thank you very much. I have 2 more poems in the book. They're about love. One of them is called My Love is a Sickness, and the other one is My Love is a Miracle. So again, looking at these kind of, like, polarities, you know, that's life. You know, life, we're dancing between this duality of our existence, the good, the bad, the dark, the light, the beautiful, the ugly, the sacred, the profane, and just really, like, life happens in the oscillation between those extremes. And yeah, so that's what I've been exploring in the poems that I submitted. So thank you. Ooh. I'll just leave that there.
Did she taste good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she was great. It was very nourishing, and I just, you know, I don't eat much meat, you know, and here in this community, it's just like, I don't know, it's just, I felt her life go into me and become part of me, and it was also a challenge of, like, really understanding that these physical forms are not the truth of who we are. Like, what we are is this eternal, essential essence that transcends body and form, you know? And so, you know, these forms, they fall away, and they change, and they're released, but the truth of who we really are can never die. It can't be burned. It can't be, you know, you know, so it was also kind of like taking that. So, you know, it was a very unorthodox way of celebrating my friend and bringing her with me, and also raised a lot of questions, like, would I eat you? Would I eat you? Would I eat?
If I wanted you to.
You know, like, it was a very, very, very potent area for some powerful growth. So, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Luke. Thanks for building it.